This is the September 27th study session, Littleton City Council. We have full council in attendance. We have one item on our agenda this evening. It's priority-based budgeting discussion. So I'll turn it over to Tiffany and we'll start with the program highlights. Okay.
Mayor, members of council, welcome. Thank you to our first connection.
I think it may come back to me in a second.
City manager, I'll be presenting with Tiffany, finance director. Before we kick this off, we wanted to give Manager Mark Ralph a chance to connect this to our leadership framework.
So a couple of thoughts here. You've seen this particular graphic before here. I shared this with council. So I think this is a piece that I think is pretty important to us as an organization. I think it captures graphically certainly my intent of trying to weave together lots of these different pieces. Vision, mission, values, kind of the center of this. And of course what we're talking about this evening is priority-based budgeting. So this is kind of a way to take the strategic planning to a large extent and start to connect it to a budget and to a much deeper degree than we've done before in my opinion. So that's the graphic. I do have just a few comments to kind of set the stage here for this evening. All of council got a nice big budget document. This is our traditional line item budget. And we are meeting on the 7th here on a Saturday to kind of go through the detail of that. And we will always have a line item budget. We're required by state law to do this. So this will always be part of our process. It had always been my hope here that we use priority-based budgeting in a larger sense to really kind of talk about programs and services that we got across the city. And as you council knows, this is our second year. And the first year we had a pretty significant effort here internally identifying over 500 different programs and services and started to identify kind of the resources that are tied to that. Hours spent to actually provide those services. So this evening is kind of the next step for us. So we went and asked all the departments here to kind of pick two, then my office picked another one. So there's really a total of 3 out of each department where we started to look individually at these programs and services. The intent of this, and we'll kind of get into some detail here, I think it's to kind of recognize a couple of things, why this is important. When we talk about programs and services, line item budget, it's extremely difficult to understand the true cost of what it costs to do that sometimes. This is an opportunity to kind of identify that cost and to identify what I call this level of service for council to decide. Ultimately, what is the level of service on these programs that you want to be able to provide to our community? So that structure is a different way to kind of frame the conversation. So this evening here, we're going to show you kind of a new form that we've put together where we've taken a lot of these programs and services that the departments have identified and we've kind of put them in a context here that we're going to share with you tonight. To a large extent, what we're trying to do is identify kind of the intent of what we hope to accomplish, the cost associated with that, and start to identify what is that level of service. One of the things that we'll talk about towards the end here is how do we measure that in the end. So I think we've talked at length about kind of a data-driven organization, and I think this is kind of a step that starts to move us this direction. So in future years, we're going to start adding more programs and services to this format, to this context. And we can't expect to have all 500 plus done in 1 to 2 years. So this is going to take a real effort. At the end, though, of this presentation and discussion, I would like to spend a little bit of time and ask council for your impression about what we just marched through. Does this kind of meet your intent? Are there some other things that perhaps you would ask us to address? Are there other programs and services? I've heard from a few of you that you would like to perhaps use this approach on other programs and services. So at the end of this, maybe we could talk about a little of that and how we might approach that in future years. All right. I think with that, I'm gonna turn this over to Sama and Tiffany, and we'll take the next step here.
All right, we want to just touch on a quick agenda. We're going to do some high-level priority-based budgeting information to remind everyone and show you some new things in the system. We've organized our program discussions by our council goals. So goal 1, Envision Littleton, goal 2, financial sustainability, and goal 3, which we're now calling good governance. This was our sort of other projects and initiatives category before. We want to touch on next steps, and then we'll have some time for general discussion, as Mark said. So as Mark alluded to, we've been doing this for 2 years, 20 months to be specific. We're still toddling here, we're learning. This year, we've allowed programs or departments to clean up their programs, and that's helping us really connect the dots so we can see programs across departments, not just one. And then we're also doing our program reviews for each department, as Mark alluded to, using this priority-based budgeting blueprint. We want to show you a piece of the system that we haven't showed you before, but that staff is using in their reviews this year. And this is the priority-based budgeting resource alignment within the system. And there are a few things that I just want to highlight here. All of the staff who's been part of this priority-based budgeting initiative has access to this. And then we can log in and see a few things. I'm going to click on the Aging Well Resource Center because you can see when it's highlighted as green. One of the things people are doing along with their reviews this year is commenting on 25% of their programs. So those comments give us insight into what the program is doing, where they might want to be taking this program, for example, to the service level increase item, and some of the notes for the budget. This is a way we're connecting it to that budget item. I also want to show you, bear with me while I scroll down to another program, collective bargaining, how we can use this to see across departments. So collective bargaining and negotiation is something that city attorney, city manager, finance, and human resources are all in. So we can see how each department feeds into this. We can even click deeper, so you can see personnel or non-personnel costs, or if we wanted to, we could see down to who's involved in that program. We can also do this via the same method we were in before. We can look at these cost summary charts where we can see what funds the program is being funded out of. Is it general fund, capital, impact fees? With the cost by division, so we can see how departments are contributing to programs, the breakdown of personnel costs, and even the breakdown of our line item costs. So this is something that staff has been using when they're evaluating programs this year. The system also comes with some sort of preset policy questions that staff can use to filter programs to evaluate them. For example, there is a public-private partnership policy question. And this filters out specifically programs that have a low reliance. That means a lot of other providers are available for that program. And it has a low relevance, which means it's scored a little bit lower based on our community results. So they can click that and see just a list of those programs that meet that criteria, and they can use that to focus on where they might want to look for partnerships. So it's just a little insight into the system we wanted to show you.
So this has been in place for the last 2 years?
We're 20 months in.
Okay.
Almost 2 years.
So I wasn't sure if, okay.
Yeah, so this is the first year we're really using the analysis
Right.
portion of it. Last year was about setting it up.
Fair.
As we've
Really.
talked about before, it's a learning, growing, cultural change for us to really think about things in terms of programs and services and not just departmental tasks.
What a
right?
powerful tool it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it too is the first year and even the second year we're finding too is resources are constantly changing. So as employees change their duties or if they're moved from one program to another, you know, we're constantly trying to watch that and realigning those employee costs with the program. Now we try to take like a one point in time where we start that, but we know if we created a new program, we might need to realign some of our internal resources for that program. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges, I think, citywide with departments and employees is really understanding the importance of analyzing your time, what you're working on, and having some really good estimates for the programs that you're working on, just because that's what really drives the data that's in the system. And so one, not only identifying programs, you know, just educating employees and ourselves on what is a program, what should be defined as a program. We gave some parameters. More than 5% of your budget, does it serve a larger population? Kind of some parameters like that to kind of engage them to really identify what's a program. And again, every year those are going to change as we add programs or maybe we reduce some services in one area. So just refining that continuously. It's a moving database, if you wanna call it that. It's always changing because we're changing what we're working on and what we're doing, so.
Is it real time? So when you make an adjustment in one program, is it adjusted?
For the most part, the data represents a point in time. I think it'd be a little overwhelming if we tried to constantly adjust everything. But we do, if, for example, with the budget this year, if people had a new program request, we did ask them to put it in the system so we could score it, see where it came out in the quartiles and whatnot. So there are some edits we make throughout the year based on how we need to use the system. Sure. Can you get back in? So Tiffany's asking me to show you our Present PPP site, which we have shown you before, and this is tree plots that, or the heat map as Tiffany calls it, that show how our programs align with resources. So I'm gonna click, we're on the safety. So if you look in here, you can see each department and how the work aligns with that. So the bigger the box, the more money in that program. The darker the box, the more aligned with safety the program is. Say that again? The larger the box, the more money the program represents. And the darker the box, the more it is aligned with the result we're looking at.
So we're looking at, what are we looking at,
We're
safety?
looking at safety.
So that's why police are pretty dark blue there.
Yes, it matches their uniforms too.
Oh, okay, well.
You can
I thought I was in charge of picking the uniforms.
Sanitary and
out, though.
sewer so big because it's the South Platte Water Renewal Partners.
Right,
So
yes.
it kind of skews that box.
Right, because we do, share 50% of the cost related to the sewer plant.
So this is another tool that the teams have been using this year. It works to different thought process types, but you can dive into this. We talked about patrol teams. You can keep clicking in and get some more detail levels, where you can also see those total costs, positions, and even operating costs, which are the line item costs involved and everything. So we've got multiple ways to see the data here, which is nice because it aligns with multiple preferences.
You got that overtime.
Yeah, quickly move on from that one. I think, actually patrol is kind of an interesting one to kind of highlight. In fact, the chief and I talked a little bit about this. Obviously, that's kind of the meat of any police department is the patrol. And how do you kind of measure success? I think with priority-based budgeting, that is one of the outcomes we're trying to achieve here is some measurement of that. That's a very difficult one. There are other kinds of programs and services where, quite honestly, that measurement is fairly straightforward. So I think this is why this is kind of a discovery for any city as they take this on, is a conversation about what is that level of service and how do you measure an outcome to know that you are successful?
And since we're showing you the heat map, I just wanted to touch on one other thing that we have done with this and that Priority-Based Budgeting and Resource X is working on is we did a program matchup with Inglewood to see how our services align with theirs, and that's something that we have available via this system, via this heat map. And Resource X has been doing an effort to program map across the state to align programs and services and find those partnership opportunities, and that's something we'll have access to as well as we go forward.
And that'd be only with the municipalities that they work with.
No, they're working, they have developed some sort of survey tool and it's municipalities outside of the PPP system as well.
Maybe this is not as apparent as it could be, but again, when you look at the blueprint process and certainly the way this is structured and we look at other public-private partnerships, what it does in my opinion is that it's asking us as certainly starting at the staff level, what are the other opportunities that we can look at to provide perhaps the same service or a different level of service? As opposed to stepping back from a system like this and just doing the traditional line item, it doesn't necessarily kind of force that conversation. So as staff, it provides that opportunity, and then obviously towards the end, the council then gets to weigh in on that. So that is my goal, is to look at all these programs and services and for that public-private partnership or some other way perhaps to kind of get our work done.
We didn't bring another copy of the program worksheet for you guys again today because we've gone through that, but we specifically asked those questions and we asked people to reach out and identify those opportunities for the programs they're reviewing this year.
Yeah. I think with having the database that shows other cities' programs as well, If you have a program that maybe isn't working out well for the city, or maybe you have one employee who's working on it and they're gonna retire, and so you're looking for other opportunities to fill that need within the community, you can always go to PPP and you can type in whatever that program is, and you can see the list of other cities across the entire database that offer that program as well. And then that's an opportunity for you to maybe reach out to Lone Tree or Centennial or Inglewood, who might be in the program, the system, to see if maybe there's some partnership that we could work together with.
Are some of these programs like the, to be able to find that, there has to be some standardization, right? So we might call it sidewalk improvement, someone else calls it sidewalk maintenance. Would it make that, how do you do that?
Well, I think what it allows you to do is to reach out to that city and really have a conversation with them on what is the program that you're doing. There's some really good descriptions that cities put in there, so you can kind of understand what their program specifically is and what they're actually doing. But it'll allow you to reach out to that city and say, hey, I see you have a sidewalk program in your city, we have one too. Can we talk about maybe looking at these programs? Do they align together? Is there something that we can help each other with personnel wise, or sharing costs or something like that?
Most of the searches we've seen so far allow you to search any term in the description. So even if they've not named their programs the same, or if they might not be comprising of all the same things, you can get to the descriptions and you can then take a first stab at aligning where you think there are really crossovers.
How confident do you feel, so I can see that being of value internally as well? So one department calls some kind of service one thing, another department calls it another thing, but they really are more alike than they are separate. So of the 500 plus programs, how confident are you that we've connected some of the smaller programs to say, actually, we're all talking about the same thing here?
I think we're still working on those connections, right? We went from 800 programs last year to 500 this year. That's a pretty big jump, but we're still working on what should be connected, and we're also working on what should and shouldn't be a program still. How large or small should your programs be? And that's something that there's not an exact science for, so it's gonna be something we develop over time.
So if you went to the PBs to another jurisdiction that was similar to ours, you could go to the tab that had all the blocks and show how their money's being allocated or something to that effect?
Yeah, so if they have shared that publicly or via the PPP system and allowed us to look at it, we can. That's not something that every organization shares out. A lot of, it's a working in progress thing, so a lot of people want to really refine things before they go public with that information.
Well, is Inglewood using the PBs?
Inglewood is, and we have done a matchup with PPP, so we can share their data with them.
So there you could go, if they share that data, then you could go to the blocks and see, well, maybe they're spending an X amount of dollars similar to ours.
Yes.
So you can look at it and just say, hey, maybe we could combine something here.
Yep.
It would make sense to me.
Absolutely.
In fact, in the case of Inglewood, we as staff sat down with their staff in the same room and kind of marched through a process here to make sure we tried to identify and align these programs and services. So we have more confidence in understanding that city than we do perhaps others.
Heidi, did you have a question?
Okay, so I'll move on in this. We had one more party-based budgeting thing we wanted to talk about. These are called the PPP Levels Master, and this is straight from ResourceX, who we're working with for this system. And we wanted to highlight this because there are 4 levels. Using it as a rational tool to stabilize the budget, reallocating resources, fueling resources towards the results of tomorrow, so anticipating your needs, and leveraging all of the possible community resources. We are currently working on all of these at once, which is fantastic. But it's one of those things we want to highlight. Typically, they say take one area, get good at it, move on to the next area. So as part of our effort, we're being very comprehensive and trying to be open to all opportunities for this next year. So it's still, we're doing all of this at once, but it's still a learning experience for us, and so we'll have to be refining this as we go forward.
Yeah, I think the staff kind of pokes at me a little bit on this topic here because, a lot of cities don't approach it quite the way we did. Basically doing it all at once here, that's a little bit of an overstatement. I tell my staff we are overachievers here, but I think we're learning lessons here. Again, we're into our second year here, so Obviously, you know, kind of this hierarchy they have here makes a lot of sense. And I think stepping back and looking at that, yeah, making sure that we spend the adequate time on step one, moving to step two, clearly makes sense. I think that we just positioned ourselves here to kind of jump a little bit faster into this thing, and at times a little bit painful. But I think it has been an enormous lesson for us, a great lesson. And I firmly believe for us as staff, this kind of process is a great way for us to kind of tell our story to our community, to our council about the programs and services. And this is all about just confirming again what it is as a priority for council. Does this make sense? And whether or not we want to somehow reallocate that resource. So that's the purpose of this in my view.
Well, in one of your reports that you sent to us, it said something about how Littleton, we're doing it, I guess, faster or at a quicker pace than other folks who have done it.
Yes.
So how long did it take Inglewood to do this?
Well, I think, you know, maybe Tiffany and Sam can comment a little bit on that. In fact, they just went to a conference here recently where multiple cities were joining in on that conversation. So you might share a little bit of insight.
Yeah, I think to kind of put it in context, we did attend a summit a couple of weeks ago, and there were a number of cities and jurisdictions from all over the United States there. And it was a really good opportunity for us to talk to them and understand how they're using PPP in their systems and how we're using it. So there was a lot of conversation with everyone that was there on what are you doing, what can we do? And I think one thing that kind of stood out to me is that there's a number of cities that have been working on PPP for 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 years that still have not actually shared that with the citizens or maybe even council, because they're still refining it, keeping it internal and using it more as an internal database and information. And with us allowing and providing information in an outward fashion, I feel like we have really stepped up and we're moving forward a lot faster than some of the other cities that have been using PPP. I think the other part too is that ResourceX has been a really great partner in PPP and priority-based budgeting, because as we've come along the process, we've kind of, I want to say, challenged them with their software and offered some opportunities for them to expand it and to give us some more information and maybe some more data that I think has been beneficial to everyone. They just updated it a few months ago and added some new features that we were like, wow, this is really great. And so I think as they develop from our comments and from what...
You said they did some updates and you said, I mean, I've never gotten an update that I said, oh, this is great. I've always said, oh, I like it the old way. And on my phone, for instance, you know.
The resource alignment stuff we showed you is an area where they did a lot of updates, and we really liked the updates they made. We think they're a lot more user-friendly.
I was just trying.
So have we begun to, you said you're working on all of them, but I do feel like 2, 3, and 4 are kind of dependent on 1. So at this point, you know, that first year was really about stabilizing the data, and I think you feel a lot more confident about it. So have you already begun, or have the individual departments begun to reallocate resources, so as they're making decisions on a day-to-day of what they're working on or what new activity is coming in, are they already actively reallocating resources or fueling resources for tomorrow?
I would say yes. You know, we're still in very early stages with that, but as we talk through some of the program highlights and just some of the touch points today, we'll give you some examples of, I think, most of those. All right, so with that, we want to get into Goal 1 and Vision Littleton, and we're going to handle this one a little bit differently. In the spirit of priority-based budgeting, we want to look at this from a whole project view, just like we would look at a program from a whole program view and look at everything we fed into it. So we want to give you kind of an overall update on where this is and where it's going. What I've got here is the first timeline we presented for the Vision Littleton goal.
I love that chart, by the way. Mark, I love that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So this is straight out of that February 2018 presentation, first timeline. And I'm going to toggle back and forth a little bit because I want to show you what it looks like on the current timeline, okay? So original, current, original, current. there aren't that many changes.
They went from black to blue.
Yeah.
Did you pick the colors?
So vision is done, changed colors to green. Comprehensive plan, transportation master plan, both on track, in progress. A couple of the updates we've made, special area plans and development codes, I'm gonna toggle back so you can see, we had them ending in 2019 to allow us to focus a little bit more. We carried on work on those based on council priorities, so we continued working on those, we added. And then we've also added this economic development model and strategic plan piece as well. So really on track with this, in fact, took on a little bit more.
You'll see in the September 7th line item discussion, you'll start to see that we put, as a result of this, into the budget, the funds here as placeholders to take on some of this, and we'll talk through the detail of that on the 7th. But for example, the special area plans, we are anticipating that we're gonna come out of the comp plan and the council's gonna probably identify a series of issues that they perhaps wanna flesh out in what I would call a deeper element for a comp plan. Housing is perhaps an example of that. So there's, I think we've all recognized that the comp plan in October is kind of one milestone, but you're likely to identify additional work over time.
So the update we want to give is just what the overall cost for this looks like, and these are the original elements: vision, comprehensive plan, the interim and international code updates, development code updates, special area plans, transportation master plan, and TEDS, and these do include some policy questions that Mark alluded to for the next year.
TEDS is Transportation Engineering Design Standards, by the way.
So for goal one, Mark has already kind of teased you about these, but we have 3 2020 policy questions coming up. It's revision of the city codes, which is gonna be a 2020 into 2021 initiative. It's 2020 strategic initiatives, which we'll probably ask for a budget proviso on, knowing that we're gonna bring back some recommendations based on the comprehensive plan and transportation master plan of what those key areas are. And then the economic model work.
So these are teasers to September 7th.
So explain that, for example, just the revision of the city codes, is that the time required by a full-time employee here or a team? Or is this outside of,
This is
What they're
team
doing.
and contract, so
Okay.
we'll have someone supporting this process.
same with the strategic initiatives?
Yeah, so for example, the revision of the city codes, zoning code largely here. So as we come out of the comp plan with a policy direction, the next big piece of this is to now align your zoning code and other codes, but largely the zoning code with that comprehensive plan. So that, as we showed in the timeline, is 18 months, a year and a half. So it's a 2020 and into 2021 project to get that one to the end. The 2020 strategic initiatives, that's kind of this placeholder, special area plans that I kind of alluded to. So we'll talk about what that could be. And as Sam has said, we're gonna suggest a proviso on that, so council could approve this November, but the council in the following year, as we kind of lay this out and flush it out, the council will have to approve that scope of work in essence.
And I might clarify, these are contract costs, they're not reflective of staff time.
That's what I was gonna ask. So that's exactly what I was going to ask. Are they specific, like external contracting costs, or are they part of the program? So you've just answered that it's outside contracting. Are we going to see this in a program view? So the program that we've started 2 years ago now, right, is the comprehensive, end-to-end comprehensive plan, so that we can see overall as a program, not just what we've paid external, but it's also the combination of internal, and it should continuously show that it is a priority for us and that there is a significant investment in that. So it's important that we see this, again, in that context of the overall program and essentially what percentages of this is part of that. Otherwise, we keep kind of flipping the way we are making our decisions.
Good point, and that is the intent of this. So as you take the revision of city codes, for example, the contract price of $275,000 is obviously just one piece of this. The level of investment in time and effort by community development city attorney's office. Others is gonna be pretty significant, city clerk. I mean, they're all kind of tied into this here. So we are prepared to kind of talk about that. It is part of the overall work plan. So as the city sets, as the council sets your goals, this first piece, in essence, comes right off the top of staff time.
And the reason that's important is because we're going to be comparing program cost for a comprehensive plan versus program cost for patrol, potentially. So that's how we're making, it's not necessarily just about this 275 decision, it's about the overall program.
Correct, that is my intent. This is I don't wanna understate the level of significance of taking on the city code as an example. There is a significant effort for that.
All right.
Is that,
Reed's got it covered,
Yeah.
we'll take care of it this week.
I was gonna say, is that 275, wasn't it like 325 somewhere else? So this is just for this, that?
This is just for 2020,
Okay, all right.
yeah. There'll be a smaller, I think it's 64,000 requests for 2021, but you're right, it's over 3.
Yeah, and I guess I would chime in, so the one-off code changes, throughout our entire code, there are a lot of revisions that need to be made, whether it's our municipal code as it relates to the court functions, some of the criminal matters need to be updated. There's a whole slew of things that need some refining and fixing and updating. But I think the majority of those costs are as it relates to the zoning and land use codes, which will be following the comprehensive plan. For those particular types of codes, zoning type rewrites, that's someone where you need a specialized person who does specifically that and can involve the public in terms of getting their involvement and their buy-in. So it's a pretty big undertaking and requires a kind of a specialty in terms of land use code writing.
All right.
So you're not gonna take care of it this week.
This is a big deal, obviously.
So moving on to goal 2, financial sustainability, we've been trying to talk about how to tell the story, and what we've come to is everything costs money. And it feels like most of those costs are always going up, but everything is very intricately connected. You can't allocate more to something else without taking away from another thing. So we're striving to find a balance here, and that's what this goal is about, becoming financially sustainable heroes here.
Is that you two dancing there?
Yeah, we thought we should wear the outfits today.
Yeah.
Capes just didn't work. This is where we're gonna get into talking about the detailed program discussions. So if you'll bear with me, I wanna go over the information that you've got in your highlight and the information we've got on the screen, and then we'll start the discussion. So your highlights have a connection to Envision Littleton, a few key thoughts for organizational systems thinking, a description of the program and the program budget. And we've got the changes for 2020 and the service level agreements for 2020, and this is where we want to focus the discussion there, and these are on your attachments. And then at the bottom, there's some potential measures, and then some of the priority-based budgeting key items, such as allocation for FTEs, where the cost is coming from, and the quartile alignment. On the screen, you see a lot of that information represented. You've got the FTE allocation, the total cost, and the quartile alignment. And then you've got the 2020 change request. The other thing we've got up here is the basic program attributes. These are one thing that every program is scored against, whether it's internal or external facing. Mandate is the level it is mandated. 4 would be the top, which would be federally or state. 3 would be charter. 2 is ordinance or another self-mandate, and 1 is a best practice. Reliance is the extent to which we are the only provider, or other people, like private organizations, can provide. Recovery cost is pretty self-explanatory. Demand will also explain itself, whether demand is increasing or decreasing. And then the population served is our citizen and community population for external programs, or our employee population for internal programs.
Can you explain the reliance again?
Yeah, so reliance is the extent to which other agencies can perform the activity. So if this is a 4, only Littleton, only this organization can do this activity. If it's a 2 in this case, it means that there are other entities that can do this.
And that's what we're trying to direct people that way, are we?
It depends on the program. And we'll have some of those conversations, right? Some things have a lot of other providers, but it may not make sense to have someone else providing the service. So we'll talk about that in the case of the program. One of the things I use is onboarding. There are other companies that could do employee onboarding, but do we want our first contact with someone to be a third-party provider? Maybe not. Maybe that's something that's best done in-house, even though we could export that to someone else. So I'm going to transition to Tiffany, who's going to bring up a representative from each department as we talk through the programs.
I just have a quick question about the quartile alignment on the, that's just a visual representation, it's not saying that's the actual number of 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Visual representation, yeah.
We'll follow up on that, so then when, like for the LIRC, where it goes down and then it says most aligned, more aligned, so that means that's where we are, or?
That's where the program is. So quartile 1 is the most aligned.
Right, okay.
Quartile 2 is more aligned, 3 is less aligned, and
It just tells us where we are though.
correct. Based on how the program scored with all of those.
And the other question I had on that, where we have the little person over there, like half person, whatever it was, it doesn't necessarily add up when you talk about what's gonna be a 20-hour position, but then it shows, say, a 60% stick figure. What was that about?
Was
Are
there
you
a
talking about
particular one?
LARC or?
Little people.
And one I'm thinking is the aging well, where it says 60% full-time staff, but they're only gonna be doing maybe around 20 hours.
One of the reasons that could be is that when they look at the FTE allocation, it allocates anyone working on that. So it's time for that person's supervisor, it's time for the facilities person who works on that program, all of that. So it's not necessarily the amount of time the program is staffed,
Okay.
but the amount of staff time that goes into creating.
Isn't that overhead?
Potentially, yes.
And one person can be working on multiple programs.
Correct.
So even though it's one person, they may have 3
It may,
allocations,
right. So it may say 1 full FTE, but it might be.
maybe 4 people.
Right. Yeah, and that's the what we talked about earlier was allocating your employees' time. Because, unless one person works specifically on one program, you're gonna have their supervisor, you're gonna have people from attorney's office, city manager, finance, who are gonna be allocated to multiple programs because they're spending a little bit of time on a lot. And that's why, this is one of the things that we get from PPP is to truly understand what is our FTE equivalent that we're working on that program. And so I just kind of want to give a little bit of overview on what you have, a little bit more to add from what Sam has said. The goal and the intention is to have program highlights on all of the programs eventually. Mark said we have over 500 programs, so these are things that we have to prepare internally based on the data that we have from PPP. But our goal is to have one of these for all of our programs eventually. Now, I'm not gonna say we're gonna get that done this year or next year.
I mean, but that's a lot of effort.
It is, and that's part of.
At that 500, it's probably 20% of them make up 80% of our budget as
Right.
opposed to 80% make up 80. So it's just where we're putting the effort.
Exactly, yeah, we're gonna look at the programs.
Full people
Yeah.
to pretend to do that.
And that's part of the conversation at the end of the presentation is having with you on what programs would you like us to focus on or look at. So that kind of ties into that as well.
That are costing us a lot of money.
And maybe jumping to the end here, maybe, a typical place for a lot of organizations to look is quartile 4, where you're least aligned,
Right.
is a more traditional place, I think, that organizations point to. I think we're using this as an example of what we've learned. So this is our first try as staff, marching through the blueprint process to start to evaluate these. So in some cases, we pick things that I think we have questioned, at least internally, trying to understand. So it's a learning experience here is for us, and then certainly we're trying to share kind of our observations with council. But in the end, yeah, we're gonna have to prioritize our effort because we're not gonna get through 500 of these sheets here in a reasonable amount of time here.
Yeah, I think it'd be like a mortgage. It's gonna take at least 30 years for us to get through 500 programs. That's
It's a new
amazing.
program.
Let me get on the calendar.
Program.
I'm sorry, can you ground me again on the quartile alignment? And so when you say most aligned, so aligned to what?
aligned with basic program attributes, aligned with our results, which if it's an outward-facing program are our community results, things like safety, infrastructure. If it's an inward-facing program, are a set of good governance results that relate to employee retention and things like that.
And where are those program attributes documented, so that?
So the program attributes are here and they're all documented within the system. The community results are something that we're looking to update next year after the comprehensive plan is finished, so we haven't provided those here because they'll be going through an update next year.
Sorry, missed that. Didn't see that big, bold, basic program attributes.
It's all right, a lot of information.
Yeah, so we had envisioned going through the program highlights that were provided in the packet, touching on a few of those and then kind of diving into a couple of them. And we have staff here to help answer any questions that you might have on the particular programs, what direction they're going, things of that nature.
And just to be clear, we're not making budget decisions about
Absolutely
these
not.
programs, we're just
No, right.
walking through.
All of this information is in your budget document that you were given this evening for September 7th discussion. So all of this is in there as well. And that would be the time that we would look at these, and if you wanted to talk about making any changes or anything, that would be the time that we'll do that on September 7th. So the first program that we have before you is LIRC Legal Services. And what this is part of a larger program that you're probably all familiar with that the library provides, and it's related to immigrant resources and services. The Legal Services provides legal advice and helps in the people who want to become citizens to get their naturalization, and it provides legal consultation, referrals to any matters that they might have to address through this process. And this is just a portion of this. And if you remember, for a number of years, the city got a citizenship grant from the federal government that wasn't approved last year. And so we had to come to council and request that we continue these programs in order to, we had a lot of people that were in the system and working through that process, and we didn't want to have to stop that, and so we asked council, can you continue to go forward and fund that program? So one of the things, yes, Peggy?
So if we get funding from other folks, it's one thing. If we fund all of this, is this only for people who live in the city limits?
I mean, it hasn't been with the USCIS grant because you could not discriminate based on geography.
Right.
So that would be a question to have with council if we did not get the USCIS grant. We did reapply for the USCIS grant just last month. We'll find out, I think the last week in September is when they make awards, whether we did receive it for 2 more years. So I think that's a discussion we would have to have after that. Yeah.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Nancy Trim. I'm the Deputy Director for the Library and Museum.
So in last year's budget then, didn't we, kind of like a peg there, that we approved the line item contingency on getting something else, right? Didn't we do that?
So if I recall, the discussion was to continue the program for, I believe it was up to 5 years, with the intent that we were going to continuously look for grants to help offset the costs related to this program. And we have been working on that. The library has been working diligently on reaching out to organizations. They did apply for the federal citizenship grant again. We feel like we were on a cycle, maybe we got it for a few years, and so they wanted to reallocate their resources at the federal level, and so we're gonna apply for that. We also did contract with an agency called Dig Deep, who looked out there to see if there were maybe nonprofit organizations that might be able to help. We reached out to some of the ones, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we reached out to some of the agencies that we've gotten grants from previously and have been able to solicit some of those to help offset it. I think what we've realized and learned that is the program is advanced right now, and finding those resources has been a little harder than we had envisioned, but we're constantly looking out there to see if we can find resource to help offset it. We also increased our fees last year, if you recall. We did an analysis of jurisdictions who are providing this service, and we adjusted our fees to kind of help boost the
Upward.
revenues upward,
went up.
yes.
Yeah, trying to figure this out.
Yes.
Will we reach out to other municipalities as well?
I think what we found is there's not as many municipalities who are providing this particular service. City and County of Denver, I believe they have a pretty robust program. But as far as any other local,
Douglas County does it.
they probably provide a piece of it through their human services department, I would think.
I wanna just kind of get us back on track. Because
sorry.
we're really not gonna analyze this particular program as we're going. We wanna continue to just focus on it as to how you've applied PPP to this. Okay.
Right, so what we did in this is there was an ask of funding for this program in the 2020 budget, and we weighed that against all the other requests throughout the city, and we weren't able to fund the full amount of it that they were asking for, but there was some funding, $39,000, that came out of this. And I think through this is a program that's going through the PPP blueprint, which allowed us to reach out to other organizations and kind of provided guidance so that we could do that. And this is one that definitely aligns with priority-based budgeting and helping us identify other resources that might be out there and helping us understand what our FTE count is related to the program and the true costs of the program. As you see, this one aligned with quartile 2, and some of the things that we are kind of focusing on for 2020 is continuing increasing or seeking funding, and then also providing some service level agreements for 2020. And so making sure that we have service provided 100 naturalization applications, that we're doing at least 20 legal consultations. And so just identifying some of the service levels that we want to commit to in the coming year. And that's something that's new for programs in the system and new to our departments, is really identifying service levels related to the program and how we want to continue, because that's what in the future you're going to look at and say, do we want to increase that service level? If we do, what's the cost associated with that? Or do we want to decrease that level, and what's the cost savings potentially related to that program?
That's what I was gonna ask, is that service level agreement put into the analysis in future years to say, hey, we only hit 40 referrals, maybe it's not being utilized as much as we thought it would be, so.
Right, exactly.
Intention.
And the important thing is setting a baseline or understanding what's relative and important to the program, and what you expect as the council and what our citizens might expect as well, and how we can balance the funding of that.
Okay.
Any other questions for LRC? Okay, moving on. Thank you, Nancy. Just a couple of program briefs on goal 2. These are some things that have been going through the blueprint analysis, and we've realized we need some more information on. So these are a little bit like teasers with more to come. Median and streetscape maintenance is a quartile 2 program. We're doing some studies on this. We're looking at a potential to bring forward a service level decrease, but we need to do some more analysis there. Sales tax auditing is another quartile 2 program, and this is something where we're looking at a potential resource reallocation. Do you want to fill in on that a little bit?
Sure, so we currently have one full-time employee who does sales tax auditing, and then we also contract with an outside agency who does some of the larger ones, maybe outside city or out of state, some of our bigger boxes that we have in Littleton. What we're looking at is we're working, and I think I've mentioned this before, we're working with our bank to see if there's a way we can automate the sales tax returns that are being remitted to the city on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. Right now, that's all manual. We have one person who manually enters all of that data on over 30,000 sales tax returns annually. And so we are I keep saying we're this close to getting that process done, but we really are. We hope to have it up and running in about 2 or 3 weeks, working with our software company. And what that'll do is that will free up some of the resources of the person who's entering all of those returns, and we can shift her focus onto helping with maybe delinquent accounts or helping the auditor analyze some data and providing recommendations to her to allow us to ensure and educate citizens or businesses in the community on the importance of collecting and remitting accurately their sales tax to the city. We rely heavily on sales tax here in Littleton, and so we want to make sure that we educate the businesses on the importance of doing it correctly and on time.
And then finally, victim services is something we'll be looking more into it towards the end of this year, another one of our blueprint programs. And there is a potential for increased cost recovery here, but we need to do some more analysis.
Just a quick question on the sales tax auditing. How does the HB 1240, the state sales tax, online sales tax, does that play into the reallocation of that?
I'm sorry, you'll have to remind me, I don't remember what that one is about. Is that the online sales tax, the Wayfair kind of decision? So that decision at the state level does not impact Littleton because we're a home rule city. So that impacts only statutory cities. The state is creating a software system that organizations outside of, in and outside of Colorado can collect and remit their sales tax for those cities and the state through. But since we're home rule and based on the definitions and our city code, we're not able to require businesses to do that. There's a task force at the CML level that we're involved in, and there's a meeting, I believe, coming up in September where we're talking about what direction can home rule cities go and what we need to do that. What we've been doing is we're able to tell businesses, we get a lot of calls daily on applying and collecting and remitting Littleton sales tax, and what we tell them is we recommend and we encourage them to voluntarily collect and remit that sales tax. And we've had a number of businesses do that. But at the state level, that does not impact us because we're home rule.
One piece I just would like to reinforce, sales tax auditing as an example of priority-based budgeting. I think it's a great example of how we've used a system here to kind of capture a conversation here and to systematically go through a process to kind of raise questions about a program or a service. Would we have maybe caught this issue or looked at potential without priority-based budgeting? Well, maybe, but I think this is a way to just kind of reassure that we identify it and then start to kind of systematically go through these things. Obviously, sales tax auditing is one of the most important programs. In fact, we show it as quartile 2. I think I would like to call that number 1, but short of that, I think it's just a great example that we've learned something. We don't have the answer quite yet, but I think we've learned something through this process on a key program.
All right, so I'm gonna move on to the, I'm sorry, Rita?
It's hard for me to discern why there's many of these that are falling under quartile 2, but when I look at, to actually Mark's example, so you would think sales tax auditing would be a 1 versus the LIRC, legal services, is a 2. So we've talked about LIRC is not necessarily impacting a big population of Littleton citizens, so it's hard to, we're kind of comparing them the same, quartile 2, quartile 2, quartile 2, but just intuitive, it feels like they're different. So maybe visibility to what's generating, why they're falling in that quartile, and
Well, I think maybe you give some direction that we can't compare them. They're all very individual. So if somebody got a 1 and somebody else didn't, they're not comparable. They're judged solely on their own, in their own silo, not against anything else.
They are, but when we look at them though, and we're making decisions of, what do we keep or not, we have to compare them, so do we keep this number 2 or this number 2? Like I can't,
We're not doing it yet.
I'm not saying now, I'm just saying having that understanding of visibility of what brings this maybe up to a 2 when, based on some of those attributes, one would think it would fall somewhere else, or what's bringing something down, that we would have expected higher.
We're doing, as I alluded to, we're updating our results next year, and so we'll be able to provide you some more insight into what those are and how those are used.
I think you'd find that very valuable. We did this many months ago, and no doubt we've all probably lost sight of exactly what that looked like. So after the comp plan is truly the milestone for us to kind of realign the goals and scoring system. That'd be a great opportunity to kind of bring that back to the council so they can understand that.
So it's a scoring system.
It's a scoring system.
It's computer generated and it just automatically says if you hit X score, you're this quartile.
In the end, it tabulates all this. All the scoring's done internally by staff.
Peer review.
And then peer reviewed. So there is a very detailed process to make sure that we have confidence in it. But there's a lot to it.
Sure.
We're happy to dig in with you.
Carol, concern about process here. It seems like the purpose of this meeting is for us to get an overview of what's going on. And we're having quite a few questions or comments that go into, for me, incredible tiny detail. And each time we do that, I lose the thread of the overall presentation. Do we want to continue as a group? Do we want to continue going into detail? And I'm tossing that out as a possibility, or that we have people take notes about what their detail is and bring it up with the authorities.
Well, this is intended to be an update on priority-based budgeting, and I think the benefit of it is the intentional planning is as we go into our budget next Saturday, kind of having this as a context for that. So, kind of keeping it along those contexts, and everybody learns differently, so there's gonna be questions and answers and stuff, but we're trying to solve some problems now, and so I don't think we need to do that, but so kind of as a middle of the ground, everybody can feel like they're getting their answers answered and you can stay tracked in.
What I'm going to do, because then diving into the detail doesn't fit with my learning style at all. What I will do is I will leave, and then tomorrow I'll watch the video of this so I can fast forward through the attention to the detail, because I lose the train of thought. And then I don't know what it is we're talking about, and that's not good for me. So I heard you say different people have learning styles, and this isn't addressing my learning style
Okay,
at all.
okay, message received.
We'll miss you.
Continue. Continue, please.
Goal 3, good governance. We want to get into some more program discussions. We're going to invite Nancy back up to talk about the Aging Well Resource Center.
She's back.
So one of the programs that we're looking at through the blueprints is the Aging Well Resource Center. And this again is at the library, and it provides resources and referral services to seniors and caregivers and providers it helps connect them with the community and resources that they might need. Maybe it's related to finding a living space for one of their aging parents or something of that nature. And one of the requests that we had in the 2020 budget was to increase the number of hours related to this program. And again, we compared it to all the requests throughout the entire city, and we decided that and came to a consensus that we were not going to be able to fund the increased service level related to this. We currently provide 20 hours of time, and one of the service level agreements that we want to continue into 2020 is to remain at the 20 hours and reassess the program. They had asked for an additional 10 hours per week, and again, that was the funding that we did not move forward in the 2020 budget. And again, you have the information of the program, and it provides you what quartile in, This one is in quartile 3, and the equivalent FTE is 0.6, and the cost is $57,297. So again, this is information on a program that came from the PPP system. We aligned it with our service levels in the future and whether we want to increase the service, decrease the service. And again, this came out of the PPP program, and they're going to continue to monitor. They'll have a full result on review of the blueprint on this program as well at the end of December. Any particular questions?
Peggy. So do we know whether we're serving just Littleton citizens or are we pulling in?
Largely, we're serving Littleton citizens. We try to always ask, and usually they're providing us with some sort of information. Oftentimes, they're a library patron anyway and coming to visit us, or we know their address because they're asking for help with transportation, or house repair is a common. People need, seniors need help with home repairs. We have a lot of questions about senior housing, so a large number are City of Littleton residents. Mm-hmm.
Karina. So my question is actually related to the process of our decision-making for priority-based budgeting and using this as an example. So given that this falls under quartile 3, and some ways to change that would be, well, maybe we have to change the mandate. So it may not be about putting more hours to it, but how do we increase the mandate attribute? Do we have to take a different approach? Is that how we would use some of this information? Or maybe we charge, right? So if we charged money, then there'd be a recovery cost and that part of the score goes up.
Right, so you could certainly do that, and part of this is to have a policy conversation. So if this is something that council wants to make a priority, you can take action to make that a priority.
And that's what we're gonna do Saturday.
No. This is priority-based budgeting, we're not doing that Saturday.
The relation to Saturday
As
is
far as
talking
line
about
items,
funding.
whatever, are we gonna discuss by line item, we're not doing that?
We're doing this book.
But then,
Which is
so
line, which is
how-
line.
So how does it tie to this?
Yeah, that's budgeted though.
I know, but that's the priority-based budgeting, and we are not, we're only year 2 and getting us prepped for it. So they're just kind of walking us through
I got
what
you.
that looks like.
This is just the model or prototype.
Yeah, we're gonna do the old style for 2020.
I got you, so yeah, so we're really just looking at a prototype of where we're eventually going.
And we use this to help us identify what we've provided to you. So for example, we put the Aging Well Resource Center through the priority-based budgeting system and it decided not to fund that request from the department, and that's reflected in the budget you see.
Gotcha.
And I think the deep dive of doing this process helps us figure out, we can realign the hours and analyze the hours to best serve the people that we need to reach and do it more efficiently with the time that we have allotted and the FTEs we have allotted.
Yeah, it could be as simple as looking at, should we be open from 8 to 2 or should we be open from 10 to 4?
Yeah.
Something like that. You know, identifying this program and looking at those things are a way for us to maybe better serve some of our population. You know, should we be open earlier or later?
So to tie the two, because, you know, if we're doing it the old way, why are we not taking advantage of the new way if we have the information? And maybe the answer is because we're not completely there yet, and that's fine. So I think the visibility, kind of what you've done from the background perspective, so for those things that you're bringing forward as us, it'd be good to have an understanding of what that program is, how it's aligned, to kind of reaffirm, you know, even for us to say this is justified and we want to continue this, as well as some of those that you may have dropped out, because again, you're making an assessment based on a quartile, but brought, as you said, if you bring it forward as a policy question, may we change that? So there's, some of this information does need to come into the budget process, otherwise then, I don't know why you're showing us this if we're not gonna be utilizing it.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the departments are doing this,
We are.
and that's eventually sort of how they're getting to these numbers.
Yeah,
So,
correct. So this is kind of a model that we're using today, again, the second year. The goal is to use this more effectively to tie to the budget in the future. So this is kind of a where we're at today conversation and letting you know how we use the tool in order to prepare the actual budget document that we are presenting to council.
So we want to invite the chief up here to talk about the police co-responder program.
Chief, I have my opinion tonight. Yeah, how long is this gonna be?
So the police co-responder program is a new program that we started in 2019. And this is related to servicing mental health issues that the police deal with every day. They come into contact with a lot of people who don't have the resources that they need. And so I'm gonna let the chief explain it a little better because he deals with it more so than I do. But this directly came from council, knowing that there's a need to help citizens out there who might have some mental health challenges.
So like we've talked about in the past, but the co-responder program for the police department really is it's good for priority-based budgeting because it gives an example of a program. The police department's got very few programs, in my opinion. This is very confusing to me, as it is to you in some parts, right? Especially the scoring and stuff.
You're just the guy walking around with a gun.
Right, yes. And this is the one program, though, one of our programs that really ties in nicely with some of the goals of priority-based budgeting. So can you partner with an outside entity to provide some of the resources, improve efficiency? Are there funding sources available through grants and whatnot that would help us offset costs? This is one of our programs that we can highlight where we have a specific, very demanding need for police and private sector through All Health Network to partner up the co-responder to respond and deal with mental health issues that our officers face hundreds and hundreds of times a year. We are called out on these types of calls. So the co-responder program puts an actual mental health professional in the police car with us when we respond to these calls so that the clinical professional can provide these services immediately to folks that are in crisis. And research throughout the country has shown that if services are provided to folks in a timely and efficient manner, they're much more likely to have a longer term effect. So the benefit of that for us is twofold. Number one is it allows our officers to more efficiently use their time to handle their calls for service because the co-responder and their resources can take on those longer term needs for folks in mental health crisis. And then number two,
So that person co-responder stays behind?
yes, they may depending upon the circumstances, right? Or they can provide services at that time. If there's not an actual crisis where we have to remove someone and take them to a facility. There are options there too, where All Health has a walk-in facility that we can go to, where people want to come with us and go to that. It helps them longer term. Our officers can help transport, or All Health will transport with our assistance sometimes. And then our officers can get back into service where this person or persons are receiving the services that they need. So that helps in that manner. And then also, we have found for throughout the country, but Littleton's no different, that there are certain you heard this with medical before, there's a certain high use element out there in society that it uses emergency rooms or uses first responder services because they're in crisis a lot. So if we could have All Health and provide longer term service to those, it helps reduce in some cases the amount of calls that the police are returning to the same location to deal with that. So there's the private-public partnership who helps out with efficiency. Then also on funding availability. So right now, the program actually started in 2018 in earnest last year, late 2017. But it's been funded 16 hours a week. We have an actual co-responder on site with us and going out with our officers 16 hours a week currently. That is entirely funded for that person through All Health. They have a grant, they received a grant for that. As you'll see coming up next weekend when we talk about budget, this is one of the programs we're talking about for the police department. We want to increase that 16 hours to 40 hours per week where we have a co-responder available 40 hours per week to go out.
And I saw that was 10 4-hour days. What about the other?
So baby steps, right? So So anyway, we're gonna work through adding those additional hours. We're happy to say that we received a grant for at least partial funding for this. We just were awarded a grant for about $30,000 of the funding request, and we'll talk about that more in detail. But there's grant funding out there for this. This is a really hot, high emerging topic throughout the country for law enforcement and mental health. So I see future grant opportunities coming forward in this as well. So this is a program, it's a huge benefit for our community, for the resources that the city's spending on this, but also the opportunity to offset those costs through additional methods.
And this program is a policy question for 2020 that we'll discuss on September 7th. And so this is how we tied it and pulled it through the PPP program and made it to the budget to show this was a priority. And it ranks fairly highly and aligned with quartile 3. So how we use the PPP program to get that program pushed forward.
It was designed for PBs, this kind of a program monitoring.
Yes,
Perfect.
Exactly.
So I might be able to answer your stick figure question too, to put it in perspective on this program. We have no.
You answered as fast as they answered it earlier.
We have no full-time employees assigned to the co-responder program, but we do have a commander that supervises the program and deals with the crisis intervention team referrals. So you'll see part of that staffing allocation for the part of the time that commander spends on this program, or other supervisors or personnel spend on this program specifically directed toward this program, if that makes sense.
It says 60%, and the other person is full-time or just 16?
We just got a really skinny person that does it, so.
We do try to cover all of the overhead so we can get a true cost of the program within there,
Excellent.
down to office supplies. All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Next program we want to talk about is inspections. We're going to bring Jennifer Henninger, Community Development Director, up here.
Thanks, Chief.
I'm gonna let the department directors talk about their programs because they can explain them much better than I can.
I think you're doing a great job.
Sure.
So inspections is a service that community development provides. It's one of our larger cost services that we do provide. You'll see in your program highlight, we had requested an additional plans examiner / electrical building inspector. Right now we only have one, and when that gentleman is out of the office, we have to do consulting services at a cost of about $125 an hour to cover that for the city. And also only having one electrical inspector at the moment, we're running about 2 days in response time for electrical requests because we only have one person certified in that area. In terms of the actual program highlights, we are looking at, in terms of our service level, our turnaround time of 15 days from submittal to the time we are getting comments back out for plans examining going on, and we anticipate that staying the same next year with the number of inspectors that we have. If we did have an internal inspector, we'd probably drop that by 2 days. In terms of program success, what we're trying to measure is reducing the number of complaints received about turnaround time and the number of building re-inspections. So when our inspectors go out to a site, frequently they have to go out 2 to 3 times for the same inspection due to non-compliance. So being able to increase education when we go out to the sites, we have to come back 2 and 3 times is important for us. I think what we're getting at, do you want to talk about that aspect of it and talk about it in general?
So again, through the PPP program, we were able to identify 3.53 FTEs are actually related to the inspections program. That's the person who's doing it, in addition to overhead or administration that also is involved in that program. The quartile is 1, I believe, and the change or the request for the 2020 budget was, want to continue to insource this, or is there an opportunity to maybe outsource this? So again, going through the PPP blueprint program to understand what opportunities are out there, allowing us to ask those questions, maybe looking in the system to see are there other cities that might be able to provide this, or are there other organizations that might be able to provide this as well. So just allowing us to have that conversation and look at what might work better for the city. It's not always better to outsource, and it's not always better to keep it internal. And so just, again, running it through the PPP program and understanding what our options are to come forward with a request of what we think is the right direction to go for that program.
So it seems to me in the past, we've talked about whether it's better to do it in-house or outsource. And I think one of the points was if we keep it in-house, we have more consistency and higher enforcement. I think the latter included, because sometimes people just wanna do what they wanna do and they don't hold people to the standard that we want. So I very much wanna keep this internal.
Do we have any other questions on inspections?
I do on recovery cost center, so that's the fees that we collect.
Yes.
So that's, gets back to our fee thing that we're.
Yes, remind me, where are we at, cost recovery?
We should have our report within the next few weeks that we will be sharing with council on potential recommended changes to fees.
I think we have that on a study session.
Probably did too.
Do we? Okay.
We did at one point, but we did pull it off due to timing. But yes, we can look at that, and then, you know, we'll talk about it during the budget discussions potentially as well, if we get it in time for that.
Right, but again, this is the way it's laid out, it's just we can actually just see it.
We also have historical data because we did do more outsourcing in the past. We did bring an electrical inspector. And so we do have that data as well.
Cool.
Alright, we'll move on to the next one. Thank you, Jennifer. So our next one, we're gonna ask Kelly, our communications director, to come on, and we are talking about live meeting coverage, and this is specifically video coverage.
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
As you know, we televise an awful lot of meetings. This week is a great example. We are televising 4 meetings in a row. This week, Monday night Planning Commission, Tuesday night City Council, tomorrow night the Telephone Town Hall, and Thursday night, I believe, is Licensing Authority. So we're recommending a reduction in the number of meetings that we televise, but obviously that'll be council's decision. That is not proposed in the 2020 budget. But I think that priority-based budgeting gave us a great opportunity to look at this program because we've really never taken a deep dive into it to see how many meetings we do and what the cost is. I was actually expecting that the cost savings to televise only the city council and the planning commission meetings would be a greater number. It's only about $7,000. But we did 111 meetings in 2018. 52 of those were city council. We cannot measure how many people are watching us now on Channel 8 on Comcast or CenturyLink, nor can we measure the number of people watching on Facebook Live. What we can look at is live streaming on YouTube. And so the numbers that we used are just those. So, you know, we can assume that that's indicative of the other ways that people might want to watch. But we did calculate the cost per viewer, per meeting that we produce. And we took a look at the number of viewers for each meeting. And for example, the highest viewed city council meeting had 320 people watching. The lowest viewed licensing authority meeting had 4 people watching. So it was a great opportunity. We probably wouldn't have taken the time to really examine what we do with live meeting coverage, but this was a great opportunity to do that. Oh, and one other thing. With our new city attorney, we've been talking about what's actually required of us and you for minutes and for video recordings of meetings. And there's a couple of ordinances, and correct me if I'm wrong, Reed, one in 2014 and one in 2017 that might conflict with one another. I mean, what we're doing, recording them all, we're in great shape, but as far as if we needed to reduce the number of meetings that we video record and go to an audio recording instead, it would require an amendment.
Yeah, just a little bit on the legislative history, because I know everyone is excited with PPP, and let's get into legislative history. So in 2014, and this will solve a great mystery in the city of Littleton. So in 2014, a particular council member, Valdez, sponsored an ordinance.
And a hell of an ordinance it was.
To amend the city's definition of minutes. And in so doing, basically, the city adopted an ordinance that said minutes shall mean video recordings. Doesn't necessarily say broadcasting, but basically for the minutes of any of our quasi-judicial boards and committees or council meetings, video recording was what was going to happen. In 2017, the city council adopted another change to our definition of minutes. I don't know if you sponsored this one. But what it was, is it was a
Was it good or bad?
It was good, it was good, but what it did is it clarified, and probably because of the Colorado Open Meetings Law, it clarified what minutes were gonna be taken at these various boards and commission meetings. So it basically defined that the official minutes are going to be action minutes, which is basically a summary of the motion, those persons who requested to speak and what the council action was. So not verbatim minutes of what happened. Inadvertently, what I've learned is that there was a part that was amended in that first reading. City council amended it, the ordinance, to add in some language that said in case of conflict or need for clarification between the action minutes and the video recording shall be consulted for interpretation, and we'll keep that video recording forever. So that was approved on first reading. On second reading, it was published with that language in it. But what was codified was actually the original language that was in the first reading. So, in sum, I know, you're excited. So,
You had to get codified.
yeah, the interpretation that I have would be that our city code requires that these meetings be video recorded. They don't require that they necessarily be broadcast. I'm not sure if that's an additional expense. And it does require that we take action minutes as far as the official minutes. So I have discussed with the clerk, we believe it's just a clerical error, scrivener error. So we are going to update our ordinance to reflect that language that talked about action minutes and video recording.
Which is what we've been practicing anyway. So we've been practicing the intent, even if it wasn't codified that way.
That's my understanding. Other than the broadcasting, isn't necessarily required for any ordinance, it's just what we happen to do.
Got a video.
Yep, we got a video and we're sending it out.
Well, we're not gonna do it tonight, but we have spent more time than we've ever needed to spend on whether and how we should do minutes over the years. And it continues now. Thank you, Reed. I think that there was also a reality about if we didn't do the action minutes, there was a cost to doing the virtually verbatim minutes. And so there is a second part to this. So by not doing what we're doing, we would need to do something else, and there, I think, is a much higher cost to that.
So the proposal here is to just televise the city council and planning commission meetings with the video broadcast and just do an audio recording of the other 5 bodies that we do.
But that's for discussion on September 7th, so just to remind you. And then I think one takeaway from reviewing this program is this is a conversation that probably wouldn't have been prompted unless we reviewed programs. This is a program, we identified it as a program. It may not be a large dollar amount, only $22,000, but there certainly is a cost associated with it. So these are types of programs when I've always said, you know, there's some things we're doing that may not necessarily think, you might not think they should be a program, but they are, and we've identified them. So this is a good example of a program we've identified, there's costs associated with it, and maybe it'll prompt discussion as to whether we change the level of service or not.
This is also one of the programs where multiple departments had to get together and meet and talk about this recommendation before we brought it forward to council. So this is one of those bridging programs. All right, thank you. Okay, we'd like to invite Keith up, our Public Works Director, to talk about office space remodels and renewals.
SUV here. I think SUV doors here. Come on. Page.
So office space remodel and renewal is a program that we've identified in the system. And I think the importance of this one is to really understand our limitations of space, specifically in this building. And this kind of ties into impact fees and the $1.6 million that council approved in the 2019 budget to allow us to reconfigure and to accommodate our growing FTE count in this building and remodel some. I think it might have been overlooked in the past, or we may not have truly understood the cost of moving people around inside this building. And so we wanted to identify and share what those costs are related to moving people around, moving modular stations, adding furniture. There's a cost associated with it. So this again is one program that we've identified, and it specifically relates to space planning. And I'll let Keith add to that or
Sure.
continue.
We don't have a master plan for facilities. We're trying to do that. Past year, we did a full assessment of the condition of our facilities. We had about 200,000 square feet, a lot less now that we don't have fire stations. And one of the things we've never done as part of that is if you don't have a master plan, thus you don't have an operational plan underneath it that supports space management, which has been a little haphazard at times. So we also don't have a stock of furniture. We've never really had a space planner on staff or anything. So we're working in that direction so that we can do that. We're overburdened in this building. Frankly, the easiest way to put it is we've got about 90,000 square feet of need in a 65,000 square foot building. We got people in the hallway, just as an example. So we're going to design with an architect and a GC in this building to make a long-term plan with the current money we have set aside. But this isn't something that's going to go away. Our operations change. We had people like, a grant writer that we have to find space for in other departments and things like that. So this also ties into space planning at our other facility, most primarily Bellevue, as well as the courthouse. All those places, we're in the process of doing that, and it takes a fair amount of time. One of the changes that I've made that'll dynamically change this is within the facilities group. We took a position that had become vacant, and we changed it over from basically a custodial management position to a construction management position that will encompass construction management and space planning. Because if we're going to do $2 to $5 million in construction and facilities in the next few years, we need some expertise in that group, which doesn't exist. So we're hopefully going to be able to get somebody out of the marketplace for that position. But that's kind of the path we're on. So right now, about 3/4 of a person, equivalent is doing some of that, but it's going to be a more concerted effort as we do the work. We actually stock equipment. So we can deal with that. Right now, our lead time on furniture is typically about 8 to 10 weeks, which is pretty typical. So, we're also doing things to keep this cost low. I sent our crew up to Larimer County and packed up 15 workstations for the for free, our cost of taking them apart and bringing them down and putting them back together, and that's how we just set up a series of offices here, so we're trying to do those kind of things. So this is something that you'll continue to see, but this is what we're dynamically spending today. This doesn't represent the cost of construction or any of those kind of things, or the cost of materials, so. You know, doing things like this room, for example, all the nice drywall around you is part of that, so.
So again, a quartile 4, you know, least aligned, it's not outward facing really, citizens don't, they come to the building, but they don't necessarily see all of our work areas, so that's more likely why it's in quartile.
The other thing I do wanna add to that though is, this building was built in the 1970s, and, you know, and to put it in public safety terms, this is not a hardened building. Hardened building. Our employees are very vulnerable in this building.
You're talking security.
Oh,
Correct.
there's brick walls everywhere.
Yeah. Well, once you're, well, you know, the third bear built this building, so it wouldn't blow over, so, you know, from the world. So we, you know, at the end of the day, that's something that's also part of all of our considerations here. Because we are very unhardened compared to modern standards, and that goes here, that goes to the courthouse, it's even less at Bellevue. So those are things that are also part of this equation, is employee welfare and safety.
It's interesting to me that it came in at a 4 because we've had a conversation with, when Bob Tipton came in, about the value of providing, you know, a workplace where there's, people feel good about it, you know, and they've got the right workspace, and they've got the right light, and they don't have to have a heater under their desk, and they don't have to have a fan in the
We'll never
summer.
get rid of the heaters under the desk. It's every facility I've had, there's always a few of those running around like hamsters.
So I walked in the other day when it was 105 degrees outside, and there was an employee in a fur coat, so I thought that was odd. But I was told it's because her office is 35 degrees. But I think that there's, and I don't know, we don't need to go deep into it, but I think that I'm a little surprised that it came in so low, because I do think that there's some other values and some other criteria that we've kind of determined before this that would have played into it. And I would also disagree a bit about the conclusion regarding the public's exposure to it. The public, we constantly have the public in here. We constantly have people coming in to pay their sewer bill or their sales tax bill, or they're meeting with the police, or they're coming in for council meetings. We are constantly having other people come in here, other elected officials from throughout our region, congressional folks, and developers and people who are stakeholders in our community, and having partners and stuff come through here. So it is, I think in those regards, I don't see that as being one of the things considered. So I think there's some subjective things, and I don't know how this vets any of that out, but that may be something that needs to be.
I think that's one of the things, is more when we brought that up, it's one of the pieces from this being our first time doing it.
Right.
When we
Yeah.
started, there was some lack of understanding of programs too, because a lot of people were learning that, so we might see these change when we rescore next year. I would expect we see some changes when we rescore.
It's not all black and white, and what, to the point earlier about, you know, looking at things, comparing them to each other, that's gonna be a challenge, but comparing them to themselves is really almost harder.
The
But
idea is
that's
they all
almost
go through
what we
the
need to
same,
do.
the same filter,
Right,
right?
right.
We can move it right up to a 1 by making sure that the scores over here, their offices are cold and hot.
They already are.
And they might not have a table, for example, since we just went through that in Tiffany's office, so that's how we'll raise the scoring up with this one.
Yeah.
So.
No, our plan is to try to rescore every 2 years. You know, it's certainly cumbersome. We're gonna have peer review groups. We're gonna 5 years? 5 years. She wants 5 years. I want 2
Our
years.
plan schedule is.
We'll probably do 3.5.
Tomorrow on this one.
But yeah, that's important to review it and rescore it annually, or not annually, but periodically, so that we can look at things like that, because perceptions might have changed, people might have.
I think it's why it's important for council to maybe review some of their criteria and policies because, you know, they're what's important. And so when council's looking at the potential for, you know, trying to secure, you know, go for a sales tax and try to bond against that and where that money should be spent. Yes, we all want money, you know, the money needs to go where the highest need is. Is the highest need drywalling this room? Of course it isn't. But is that important? Yes, it is. So, and that's where priority-based budgeting, but I think council needs to have some sort of churn of this stuff before you guys start churning, because a lot of what you're making decisions on is what council has said is important, and that will change too. And it will change as, you know, in 6 months when the service center falls down, because we didn't take care of it.
Please wait till spring. Please wait till after snow season if that's gonna happen.
But those are the types of things that are gonna be, need to be run through.
And that was the point I was trying to make earlier about, and we're doing a little bit of this now, is, you know, how do we get to what's behind the quartile? So this is telling us what's behind the quartile and how it's scored, so that, and I also like the approach that it actually churns through them first, and that they then bring it to us, either some that come to the top that are gonna be an ask for money to talk about, here's where it landed, here's how we qualified it, and here's why we're asking, or even the ones that they've taken off the list, I think is just as important for us to know. I'm not saying all 200 or I don't know what it is, but it's, you know, some of each, so that we can have that input to say, okay, I understand it from the perspective of PBB and the quartile, why you made that decision, but we may choose to make another decision because of a number of factors. But I do think the first iteration, I think it is smart that the first iteration comes from staff.
Actually, I think this is a good lead-in because this actually was our last program and we're just gonna be opening it up to discussion and kind of your thoughts.
A couple brief highlights here.
Oh, okay, sorry, I guess
I will keep these very quick. Thank you, Keith.
Oh, well. Never mind.
These are
City manager. Sorry.
We just want to
Thanks,
highlight
Keith.
a couple of the things we've done in the spirit of PPP or through the PPP program.
Oh, yes.
These are things we've done. So we've insourced at the employee clinic up, so we now share that. We have outsourced verification of employment, and now I believe have zero cost for that program because of our outsourcing. We've done a number of resource reallocation and efficiency efforts, including collective bargaining and negotiation and payroll processing. And we've also done a service level increase at the permit center, which we've talked about as a rapid residential review process, all in the vein of PPP.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I didn't cut this one out, I'll apologize, but the employee clinic operation is kind of an interesting one. I think the opportunity here by looking to, was it a Ford dealership?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to kind of share the cost of our clinic, reduces our cost, I think was a great win. So, you know, kudos to the staff for working on that one.
Where is Phil? I was trying, I know one of the Wadsworth.
Where's what?
Phil Long, that's who we.
Countywide and Broadway.
Broadway.
Where is it?
Countywide and Broadway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at expanding the clinic even further to a secondary location to service Littleton and Phil Longford employees as well. So again, another opportunity to expand our service level.
All right. So we want to touch base on
But
next
I
steps.
have one question.
Yeah.
But and maybe we'll get to a detail, but it does say keeping healthcare costs reduced.
Yeah, so the intention of the employee clinic is that employees can go there. There is no copay, there's no doctor charge, there's no deductible or anything related to the employee going to that clinic. Prescriptions that they house in-house are free to employees if they need to renew or refill a prescription. So it's an opportunity for them to go there directly. It's right at the Buck Center, it's local. they're not gonna be spending as much time if they just run across the street. Let's say they work here, so they can just run across the street to go to that clinic rather than taking half a day off to go to their primary care doctor. You know, if they go to a primary care doctor for a doctor's visit, there's an automatic copay when you go there. There's a charge back to our health insurance fund. And so it is limiting the cost related to providing health service to our employees.
And you're gonna see, we have a great story to tell on this topic here on the 7th, so we'll save that.
You know, we did want to talk about next steps. We had that before general discussion, if that's all right. Budget workshop, September 7th.
That's what we were just talking about.
No?
Glad we got that, Kate.
So PPP
Busted on videotape.
You sure you wanna keep it, record everything live, Kelly?
Right. So party-based budgeting related, we're still working through those program reviews. Implementation plans are due in December, and then we're anticipating a leadership retreat this December as well. We'll be refining some of this information. For 2020 and beyond, we'll be working on connecting PPP to Envision Littleton via the results update and a full program rescore. We'll also be looking at developing performance measures. This is a new thing we'll have to be introducing slowly and intentionally and logically. And there's a potential for a public component of PPP, and we can talk about the timing and the detail of this at a later date. We did want to open it up for some general discussion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's the slide I was trying to jump.
I supported you on that.
Have we eliminated any, we eliminated 300 programs or merged them into, has there been any pushback from any particular group that has said, why did you get rid of that, that's so important?
I think what the key is now with the resource allocation piece, we can show people where their departments fit into that program, and that has helped with some of that pushback. Because I think there's a concern, if you take away the program that I own, are you taking away my job duties? And now we can clearly show, no, you're counted right here. We're just counting you together as a group.
There's been no public impact to this
I'm
program.
thinking more the
Sorry.
public rather than the city or staff.
So the thought was, and we already kind of started this conversation, I guess, just your general observations of what you've seen here tonight. Again, this is our second year and we're trying to move this concept forward. If you had some general thoughts about it, great. Even if you had some programs that you would like us in the future to look at, you don't have to name them now, but if you wanted to send that to me, that'd be great. I think we as staff would probably take those and kind of analyze and see our ability to do that. Just based on the information of where we're at. We'd certainly welcome that.
So I would like to see it in all different quartiles and have an explanation of this is why it's quartile 1, this is why 2, 3, 4.
Makes sense, yeah.
Better range.
Rena? So how do we get a overview of all the programs that are out there in an easy, digestible way? Is that possible?
Okay, we'll have to think about that one. I'm looking at Tiffany's.
Yeah,
I
it may
don't-
just take a morning, maybe you come in and look at the list of programs,
We can guide you through it maybe.
So you asked the question, if there's some program that you wanna look at, I don't know, which ones are the programs that are out there? Like, how do I see what programs that are out there that I'd wanna learn more about?
So it's all the system is what you're saying?
We can print a
We
list,
can
I
print
see.
lists
Yeah.
and we
Sure,
can get that
Sure, we can print a list. You may not necessarily understand exactly what it is, but we can certainly start with that.
That interactive tool that you showed, the heat map, is that something that is accessible, or is that what would come in on a Monday morning, or?
I think that'd probably be kind of a Monday morning thing. Right now, it's only accessible to internal users who have licenses in the system.
Which one was the tab that you clicked to and gave you the boxes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause that shows you size and alignment, so it's a very easily digestible.
More than happy to, if any council member wants to take a drive through this thing, we'd be happy to set you up.
Great, thank you.
Good, really good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you Saturday.
next Saturday.
Next week from Saturday.
A week from Saturday, yes.
Yeah, we've got a week and a half to read our budget.
Nice.
Something to do on Labor Day.
Exactly, we've got a 3-day weekend. Council, bless us. Okay, Mark, you have a couple
I do have a couple of issues here. I shared an email here with council earlier. Our election commission had passed a recommendation on the city council here about yes, I suppose I could. Short enough here. Yeah. So the memo I passed on here, the election commission met on Monday, the 29th of July, requested the city clerk provide their recommendation to the city manager for discussion with city council. The election commission recommends approval of a request to the Colorado General Assembly, House and Senate, and Governor that they research and possibly amend Title I and Title 31 of the Colorado Revised Statutes so that any municipal elections may be conducted using approval voting, and that the Secretary of State promulgate rules as necessary for implementation. Vote was 4-1 in favor. So my question to council is whether or not you would like to schedule this here for a regular meeting for debate and a decision.
Regular meeting or study session? You
I
said
said
regular.
I did say regular. If you wanted a study session to kind of talk through this in more detail, I'd be happy to do that.
Would it be a resolution? Is that what it is?
I'm not sure what it would be, that what they're asking us to do is to ask the state to do this, and I don't know. I guess the question to council is, do you want staff to pursue bringing this forward in form of a resolution that the city council of Littleton, in conjunction with their election commission, are asking the state to do this? Karina?
So I don't understand yet what, if there is an urgency or a necessity of this. My concern is capacity and where our focus is, and use of staff resources or even our resources for that matter, given our list over there. So unless there's something that's driving an urgency here that may be related to the census or otherwise, I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, I just don't know if we need to do it now. Does it change or impact anything?
Well, I will say your schedule for study sessions are getting pretty booked.
Right.
With this council. So if you wanted a study session on the topic, I think that might be a little difficult.
Kyle?
I don't want a study session on it, I don't think we need to have a study session, I just, what would be the staff commitment? If it's just a resolution saying, state, take a look at it, the state can say no, or okay,
I
there's
don't
not
know
a
that I'd
whole.
wanna take that position if I didn't understand it better though, so that's why I feel we would need some kind of discussion or study session to understand if we would even wanna take that position, right?
Well, I don't think it's a position we're taking.
Or ask, it's an ask, it's a.
And that's for the state to look at it, and the state could just say no. And
You're
if the state
asking
looks
the
at
state
it,
But we're
to do
saying
it.
we're supporting it if we're asking them to look at it. And I'm not saying I'm not, I just really don't know, and I'm just looking at how do we have where do we have the capacity?
And from my understanding, having been at the election commission meeting, it is not a mandate that necessarily the city of Littleton itself supports this. It's just that perhaps in the future, the city of Littleton would like to have this sort of voting method available to it.
I didn't get that at all in the letter that we got from them. That's interesting that was at the meeting.
I didn't take it as saying we support it, I'm just saying, hey, state, look at it, we don't have to do anything with it.
Yeah, cause it's their call, not ours. Yeah, I'd be okay with the revolution. A revolution.
I know.
Resolution.
Okay, Jerry's okay with that. Peggy?
Yeah, I don't think it does any harm to have somebody be looking at it and weighing it.
I'm sorry.
I mean, as long as we don't have a study session or as long as it's just a simple resolution, I'm fine with it, It's just say, hey, state, take a look at it. We're not supporting, we're not saying this is something we want to do, please allow us, it's just saying.
I think it's gonna depend on how it's written. I'm not in favor of it. I have not heard any groundswell from any entity other than the election commission, and that has just happened regarding approval voting. I know that Mr. Atwood has been a huge advocate of it for a number of years, and I appreciate your efforts with that. But I've not heard a huge need for that. We represent a community, and when you send something to the state legislature with our names and signatures, et cetera, on it, I think it carries whether they do it or not. We're representing a community, and so I appreciate the election commission. I appreciate that that's something that they are interested in, but they are appointed by elected representatives, and I'm not hearing anything. I'm not in favor of it. If at some point there needs to be a bigger discussion, then that would be the point. I agree with Karina, we don't have capacity for that now. But I'm not in favor, but Karina, you didn't weigh in on it in terms of do you want to do a resolution that would not take much staff time?
No, I wouldn't be comfortable doing a resolution not knowing what we're doing, not understanding what we are essentially signing. So I would not be comfortable without a study session. And my point is, I don't think that this is a priority in the study session right now, for that matter.
Okay, 4-2, bring a resolution.
Okay. All right, I'll schedule that as one convenient here. I have another topic, if I may. I sent an email out this afternoon. I don't know if you had time to look at it, but the Highline Canal Conservancy has a special event here on Saturday, September 14th, 9:30 to noon. Councilmember Fay can't make that. She's been our liaison to the Conservancy, and the mayor can't make that date either. And they have, apparently they're wanting an elected official from each jurisdiction to be there, hold a sign representing your city, and I'm sure a photo op, but also a kickoff here to this event. So if I had another volunteer from council, I'd be thrilled to pass that on. I did send you a little bit of a flyer.
Give the date again.
It is the 14th, Saturday, September 14th, 9:30 to noon.
I cannot.
And I already heard from Peggy, she couldn't make that.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Could be.
Yeah, I could be too, maybe.
Yeah, I could be.
I appreciate it.
And I'm sure we could get Hillary to tighten up, or Harriet,
Yes.
to tighten up the time that you would need to be there. I think that's kind of an event.
Yeah.
So what is that window of time that you would be needed?
We'll confirm.
We'll reach
Yeah,
out
that's
to
how
her.
I'll let you sure, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can just put me down there and just send me an email or something.
Okay. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate you volunteering.
Man, I need some volunteers. You guys have Cheech and Chong everywhere.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Okay. Anything?
Other than I sent out a memo to council asking for some direction on a particular litigation matter. I have kind of a quick turnaround on that, so if council could give me their thoughts on that, that would be great.
And for those who aren't familiar with the particular situation, you're more than welcome to reach out by phone and get some more detail from the city attorney.
Sure. Sorry, Mayor, one other thing. We have our telephone town hall tomorrow at 6 o'clock?
Yes.
6 o'clock. And this is on, of course, our comp plan and our TMP. So I hope council can make that. And this will be our third telephone town hall.
Are you doing it in the?
Yes, we're doing it in the council chambers here next door. So public is welcome to come there. Or obviously, it's a telephone town hall. You can call in.
Bring the telephones with them.
Yes.
They're on that one there.
Yeah, and I personally really enjoy these. Our last one we did here, we had roughly 600 people interact on that.
I think a little more than that.
More than 600. Oh, 800, wow. So, I mean, this is a great way to kind of connect with people here on the topic or on the public comment phase of those two plans.
Or you said it was gonna be right in this room?
Next door, in the
City
council
I'm
chamber.
signed up for it, but I wasn't.
Okay.
And will you be putting in writing comments, grouping them, doing them?
Yes, we have a process, a system to kind of take the calls and hopefully kind of aggregate them.
And we'll get a transcript of the meeting as well, and then we'll be replaying the meeting on Channel 8, and on it'll be available on the website too, so.
Cause I already told you on Sunday I can't come.
Yeah.
And our September 3rd meeting is canceled. So we have plenty of other things in between to keep filling up our time, so next time we're back will be budget on the 7th at the museum.
Yes.
Museum, alright.
All right, we're adjourned.